Okay, we're ready. Good afternoon and good morning, everyone. My name is Grecia Suárez, Logistics Coordinator at the UNAM UK Center for Mexican Studies. It is a pleasure to welcome you all to another session of our series Science in Dialogue, pardon, a space dedicated to sharing the work of UNAM researchers who approach scientific challenges from interdisciplinary and international perspectives. Today, our director, Dr. Antonio del Rio, could not join us, but he sends his warm rewards and best wishes for a successful session. We are very pleased to have with us Dr. Heriberto Ruiz Tafoya, who will deliver the talk entitled Spectral Vulnerability of the Urban Poor in the Metropolitan Area of Mexico City. In his presentation, Dr. Ruiz Tafoya will explore how inequality, marginalization, and media narratives contribute to what he defines as spectral vulnerability, a condition experienced by impoverished communities living on the peripheries of Mexico City. Dr. Heriberto Ruiz Tafoya is an associate professor in political management and emerging markets at the National School of Higher Studies, ENES in Spanish, Juriquilla at UNAM. He holds a PhD in economics from Kyoto University in Japan, an MBA from Doshisha University, Kyoto, Japan, and a master's in science, technology, and innovation policy from the University of Sussex in the UK. His academic work focused on the political economy of food and poverty in the global south, and he has conducted research and teaching in Japan, the United Kingdom, and Mexico. This session will last approximately 1 hour, including 45 minutes for the presentation and 15 minutes for questions from the audience. So you're welcome to share your questions in the chat in the YouTube live stream, and we will share with Dr. Ruiz Tafoya. Doctor, the place is yours.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon in UK. Good morning in Mexico. I want to start sharing my presentation. It's about the borders of Mexico City. I don't know how many of you have been there, but I will try to explain to anyone, even those who have never been in Mexico City or even at the periphery of Mexico City, that sometimes it's not recommendable because it's a little bit dangerous at the periphery. But my topic is about social vulnerability, people living on the periphery. In the past, in English, we used to call this word as slums. There is one famous book, Mike Davis. The name is The Planet of Slums. In this book of Planet of Slums, published in 2007, he mentioned that the largest slum area in the world is this one that today I'm going to present. This is the largest slum area in the world. And I believe so, that is one of the biggest, perhaps the biggest area of the urban poor people in the world. And this is the place where I am doing my research. But today I'm going to propose to you a new concept that I am working on. The name is Spectral Vulnerability, or Spectral Vulnerability. There is a new version of the effects of the social vulnerability. That is my purpose of today. This concept is aimed to analyze it's a category for understanding the dense social ties between peripheral urban dwellers and the most impoverished and vulnerable populations in this big metropolis like Mexico City. Then the key concepts are social vulnerability. I will use the word of urban bottom. That is a new concept proposed in Japan by Hideo Aoki, in terms different to urban poor. Sometimes I use urban poor just to communicate with the other audiences that they know the word urban poor. But we are trying to propose also the word urban bottom, because not all the people who live in the periphery or even to live in slums or favelas, not everyone is poor. Sometimes this idea of poor is not useful, but even they have some money, they still belong to the bottom of society. And the concept of spectral vulnerability. I will work on this, and I will give examples of what's going on in Mexico City. The first point is the vulnerability, the social vulnerability. This idea is more or less quite well known in all the world. Is the idea of different groups and sectors of society are subjected to deficiencies and disqualification processes that place them in situations that treat their ability to solve problems of subsistence and the social achievement of a satisfactory quality of life. Then this is very important because social vulnerability is not an output, it's not a final effect. It's a process, it's an ongoing process. And during this process, some peoples are behind. And someone in the like forward side, minimum people like going to the direction of smart cities, organic food, green areas, education with artificial intelligence. This kind of abilities that very few people can get in, and many others are living behind, and with some deficiencies, inabilities, lack of skills, disqualification, and sometimes this one create a lot of problems for their own subsistence. And even if they subsist, the quality of life is not so good. That is the key point of the vulnerability. And this depends on the existence and possibility of accessing basic sources of rights, of well-being, paid and stable work, knowledge and skills, free time, security, provision of social services, economic wealth, patrimony, political citizenship, yeah, all of this, no, integration and ethical cultural identity, all these elements of life that sometimes are not getting by them, and they are in conditions of vulnerability. This is the departing point. Yeah, and the most vulnerable, those who are really in the problem of subsistence, or sometimes in getting in many troubles, are single moms, because usually they need to work and their children are sometimes living with family or somewhere else and have a lot of accidents and problems. The underclass, this idea came from the United States, but we can have a similar concepts in England or in Mexico. No? The underclass, in our case, immigrants, Black people, indigenous people, junkies, drug addicts, crackheads, all these people who are behind prostitutes. Marx used to call this one the lumpen proletariat. Those who are really in very vulnerable conditions, not only to subsist, but frequently to have violence against them. Those truly cannot help themselves, and who we can portion blame, recriminate, and demonize. Also homeless, all the problems of immigrants, all the bad situations of society are sometimes blamed to them. And they are used as scapegoats. When the police wants to capture a criminal, they use one of them. Yeah, all these kind of really very vulnerable people. Then Hideo Aoki wants to propose how do they play in society, and he called the urban bottom. They are those who are really behind. And the left side of this slide, you can see those who really homeless, no, road sleeper, and above them, informal sector, self-employees, and informal vendors, and those who we know in our cities in Latin America and Mexico, tianguis, ambulantes, all these people that they sometimes they pay rent in a small room, or sometimes they share rooms with families. They have a lot of living in informality. In Mexico, we have around 56% of people living in informality, and homeless is growing the quantity. Around 3,000 people living homeless in Mexico City, but their estimation is, I think, is more like than that. And the formal sector, or those who are unemployed, but they have a house, they live with the family, independent workers, and formal workers, those who have a permanent job or have a regular job, means like 3 years contract, 2 years contract. All this structure of society is defined by Aoki as a way of earning money, no? And the place to realize themselves as a part of the labor. But on the other side, they live somewhere. They live on the street, and there are also a stratification hierarchy of housing, not only hierarchy of labor, but also hierarchy of where do you live. If you live in the street, in a formal settlement, in a slum, in a public housing, in a low-price housing, all these structures play the role in the society. And the very bottom are those who lack of money, sometimes frequently lack of money, or are in the level of subsistence, and also lack of housing, or they live in the worst places. They have a constant downward pressure. Those who are in the informal sector, or those who live in public housing, they are afraid to be part of the slums, or be part of the informal settlements, or live as homeless, because society pushed them. If you lose your job, if you have your police take your merchandise, and if you go to prison, you very constantly you can go downward and go to the very bottom. And it's more difficult to go to the affluent society at the top. Usually there is a constant dynamics in society to push down, and more people are in the middle, low, or even in the low, just surviving, or in risk of survival, or risk to be part of the bottom. This is an idea of the urban bottom. Those who live at the bottom, and sometimes can be by labor, or by where do they live, or together, hierarchy of housing and hierarchy of labor. Aoki proposed this dynamics. Also, he proposed where we can identify these people, because we know from Marx, we call the proletariat, and those urban very bottom, lumpen proletariat. But there are some persons who we don't know where are they. And this is the idea of the bottom worker. Those who have a job, a corporate worker or independent worker, and unemployed, we know all of these ones. But the problem is the informal worker. Some of the informal jobs, that there are many people working in informality, they are really not a lumpen proletariat, but they are also not proletariat. Some in England, some people call precariat, and in the United States, working poor, but they don't consider the informal sector, because it's not so high, the informality in the US and England, like in Latin America, and particularly in Mexico. Then for those workers who are also informal workers, and they are not lumpen, we call them a bottom work. They are not lumpen, but they are in the border, in the frontier, to be lumpen, or a little bit above, to be unemployed. There is a lot of sector in our big cities that are in that middle point, in that risk point, and we consider them bottom workers. And then the other concept is the spectrum of vulnerability. The specter of vulnerability will be better. And I am building this concept with three ideas. One, we have already structural conditions in the city that divides people who lives well, with certain possibility to have a higher well-being, and those who lack infrastructure and other services, and they are in risk to live to be vulnerable. And for this one, this is the departing point, but this around them there is people living. We observe that there are very bottom people, vulnerable people exist in the city. We can see them in the train stations, subway stations, bus stations, in parks, central parks, in bridges. We see them during all the city, through all the city. We can observe very vulnerable people in the red lights, asking for money. We can see them all the city, vulnerable people, indigenous people, immigrants, homeless. We can observe them. We know they exist. Even they are not in their neighborhoods, but we see them in the society, in the city. That's why it's part of the spectrum. That's part of the spectrum of imagination. We see them. They are real and they are part of us, but even we don't have a relation with them, but we know that they exist. The other point is many people living in the peripheral of the city. In the past, their parents or the grandparents or even themselves, they had been accumulating abuses and tensions with their bosses, if they are vendors with police, if they are workers, domestic workers in the house they work, if they are drivers, if they are factory workers, they receive a lot of oppression, sometimes economical, sometimes verbal, sometimes physical, and accumulated. No, that is part of their daily tensions that they know that the society is quite divided. Some people has money, has power, and those who lack this power, lack this money, and live in the border of formality, informality, and or in the marginalization in the periphery. And the other one, the other point, I'm going to explain these points. I want to develop better with some examples. The media spreading. In the media, in the news, we constantly see and read and hear news that are not so good news, from the narco traffic, for criminality, for informality, for abuses, for accidents, multiple quantities, large quantity of media news spreading in our bad news, and many of these ones relate to poor people, and some of them are in their own neighborhoods, and that accumulate this specter of vulnerability. I started to analyze this one since 2021 and 2023 in the periphery of Mexico City, in the neighborhoods of Chimalhuacán, La Paz, Valle de Chalco. There are municipalities and some neighborhoods inside. And my approach combines political economy, urban sociology, social geography, social anthropology. It's a mix of disciplines and science, social sciences that I use for this study of vulnerability, of spectral vulnerability. Then the structural conditions, I use census, the demographic census, using eight variables from education, housing, access to infrastructure in the house, the conditions, if they have a car, if they use mobile phone, all this materiality that we can find in the census. How many people living in the house, if they have access to internet, all these variables I use to make a map and identify who lack of these material conditions. And in this map, you can see the green areas are those who have the best or better material conditions in the city. That mostly is a middle class or nice neighborhoods. And all the red part are the poorest areas of the city in the periphery. Many of these neighborhoods in the periphery are in the east side of the city. That part used to be a lake in the 500 years ago, 400 years ago, even 200 years ago, all of this was Camus Lake. 100 years ago, only half of this was a lake. And constantly, even now, we have floodings in that area because it's the lowest part of the city. And this also when we suffer a lot of floodings every year, and many other problems. And this is the poorest area on the east side of the city. And this is when I did the neighborhoods, and they have in this city the poorest material conditions. For those who have never been here, you can see the difference. There are some hills in the periphery that similar to favelas, the Mexican favelas in the municipalities of Tlalnepantla, in Ecatepec, in Naucalpan. But in the east side, because it used to be a lake, we have a very few hills. Majority of this is just flat because it was a lake. It just was flat. This area was super flat. Is when Mike Davis, in that book of Planet of Slums, he mentioned that the largest area of slums in the world. In these neighborhoods that I'm doing in La Paz, in Municipal La Paz, now in the news is kind of famous recently because it was an explosion of a gas pipe, a gas tank. It was kind of an accident. It's very close, around 15 minutes walking from when I'm doing interviews there. 15 minutes there, and even I asked my friends living there, and they hear, and some of them knew some people who had accidents. It was a terrible news that is in that corner in Iztapalapa and the border with state of Mexico in Los Reyes La Paz. This neighborhood was also famous quite recently, a few months ago, in August, because one child named was Fernando He was kidnapped because his mother had a debt of 1,000 pesos. I don't know how much is in pounds right now. Maybe don't know, but 1,000 pesos is not so much. It's really almost nothing for a regular Mexican. Maybe 3 days work for a lowest rank of labor. 3 days labor, 1,000 pesos. And she was a single mother. She got indebted and she couldn't pay. And the person to try to force her to pay the debt kidnapped her son, 5 years old. And during this kidnapping that was long, and he died. And the worst of this situation that in this neighborhood, in the street, in the neighborhood, in the house, it was a big land, living around 8 families. They listened, they knew that the child was there, and no one helped. No one helped, no one told the police. And the mom went to the police and the government didn't help. It was horrible, not only because he died, an innocent person, a very innocent person in a very bad situation, but all the neighborhood, no one helped. And this is an important information because in the past, we used to know, or we used to believe that the poor people has a stronger social ties, solidarity, helping each other. And in the past, it used to be that. But in the last 25 years, last 20 years, this system is broken. The social ties are broken. Even if you see that someone in your neighborhood or your neighbor has kidnapped a child, and this child is crying and making noise and is hitting, and no one helps. It's terrible that all these accidents is happening in front of everyone. Everyone is ignoring, and it's a good sign of the vulnerability of these persons. I took also this photograph in 2023. Those who have never been in Mexico, or maybe I need to explain a little bit more. But those who are Mexicans, you have seen maybe all this. There are two type of chapels in this neighborhood. This is in the corner of one street street store, neighborhood store. In the corner, people at night usually drinks beer, and sometimes there are friends there, and frequently fight each other against other neighborhoods, against guns. And sometimes happen these accidents, and that's why this is the reason of these two chapels. One chapel is for the Virgin, Guadalupe Virgin, and in the neighborhood is very popular. And the other one is a chapel of one young person who was killed in this place. And the family make a small chapel in remembrance of his life and his body. He died in 2019. He was born in 1998. He was still quite young. And this you can frequently observe crosses or chapels. If the family has money, they make a small chapel for the body, or for the spirit of the person. And next to it is the Virgin. And I don't have time to show you more photographs or some information about. Now there are growing chapels to the dead. Santa Muerte is growing rapidly. Judas Tadeo, Guadalupe are famous, but now it's growing rapidly. A lot of chapels of the dead, Santa Muerte. Also, you can see a lot of santeros, a lot of drawings and photographs or graffitis of santero. Santero is a religion came from Cuba, mixing voodoo with other traditions. There's a multiple levels of religiosity that is changing in the society, religious beliefs. Not only the traditional Catholic with Guadalupe, or Judas Tadeo, but also a lot of spirits of the dead, because people is dying, and many people who is killing each other is young people. In terms of the income, we can say, in generally, I interviewed 30 households, and these households, if you contrast to those incomes in Africa and Southeast Asia and the World Bank limit, they will not consider poor. They are above a level of poverty of $2, $2.5. However, when you do a deeper analysis of the house and doing the income per capita, per income per family, you see that they are, most of them, half of them are in really economic trouble. The majority of the income of these families came from informal economy. Very few of them work in nice companies, and these companies are beer companies or construction companies, but the majority work in small, medium enterprises, and most of them informal business, and some others are street vendors. And from this conversation, the social vulnerability I found seven topics around. This is representative of 5 households who are in the most vulnerable in terms of economic situation. But sometimes in other families also have these problems. One is single motherhood. Single motherhood is a big issue in all the country, perhaps all the continent, in perhaps all the world. Single mothers are those who suffer the most because they need to get the income and also take care of children. In some cases, even they have also disabled children, and this is super an extra disadvantage. Disabled, if you have in your family disabled children, because there are no schools for these children, no infrastructure for take care of them. The disabled children's schools are in the center of the city. Usually this is expensive. You cannot bring children to there. And most of the disabled children are not attended. If there are disabled children in the periphery, they will remain like that. Also, LGTB have a lot of struggles and risks. It's growing the acceptance of LGTB in Mexican society, transgender, but not sometimes machismo and the vulnerability against women and against LGTB are also constant, and they are frequent in risk and constantly receiving news that they suffer attacks. Precarious jobs, yes, that's one is a reality. Precarious jobs, seamstress, domestic workers, IT freelancers, exploited IT freelancers, street vendors, the snack bartenders, and the level of income is no more than 6,000 pesos. Sometimes, as I can say, it's informality. They don't pay taxes. They avoid to have relations with the government. And for this reason, sometimes they are hidden or semi-hidden or temporary in one place, temporary in another place. This type of unstable jobs. Some of the children also abandon the school and they don't have job, not have school, and this is also frequently observed. And this a lot of vulnerability for these young people, because they can be used as scapegoats for the mafia or the police, or they can join some gang, or simply they are isolated. A lot of young people are suffering this. There is not enough infrastructure for bringing them to school, to give scholarships, to have good teachers, or enough teachers to try to pay attention on their thoughts, their emotions, and try to motivate them to go back to school or to find some job. There is a lot of problems with youth in the periphery of Mexico. Also, all the families, socio-psychological struggles with domestic violence, neighborhood violence, lack of income, fear, all these kind of situations, not together. But the good in some points, the good news is that recently government is giving some money transfer for elders. Elders are receiving money since 2018. This is a good news. That is a good relief. Also for disabled children, if they are advanced disability, they also receive some money. And recently they are trying to promote also some money transfer for single mothers, but not all the mothers still can apply. And in some local markets, you can find elements of solidarity. They take care of their children. They talk each other in terms of join some money if someone needs medicine or pay a doctor. Still, remnants of solidarity is not maybe in the neighborhood as such or in the street, but in the market, yes, in the markets, because they protect each other. Vendors in a local market, they protect each other. These markets are public markets, are having infrastructure, and inside of this, they have a strong solidarity because they need to protect each other. It's the only one that I found as a kind of good news. The governmental money transfer is helping, and also solidarity in local markets. Those of you have never heard about this, it's a government transfer, and if you are more than 65 years old, you receive every 2 months around 6,000 pesos, 7,000 pesos. That is 1 month of work of all the houses I study. The average income is 6,000, 7,000 pesos a month. Is the equivalent of the government transfer for elders. And this is really, really an important relief for these families. Thanks to this money, people is abandoned poverty and are abandoned horrible jobs. At least they can survive with this money. It's a good news. However, this money is just a relief. It's not a solution. It's just a relief. Other groups who receive some money is people with disabilities. Some of students, they join a program and they need to show that they really need the money. Some of them can get a scholarship. And outside Mexico City, there are other programs like Sembrando Vida, but in the city, really in the city, mostly it's elders, people with disabilities, students, and recently the state of Mexico and the federal government are trying to implement also transfer of money for single mothers and women. And if this money arrives to them, also it will be an important relief. This money doesn't solve the problem of vulnerability. It's just a relief. Then the vulnerability, if it's not material, there is an additional psychological. The first one is the reference. The reference of those vulnerable, the most vulnerable that we observe on the streets. We observe a lot of indigenous communities coming from Chiapas, Oaxaca, the southeast of Mexico. Constantly, we observe groups of families, a lot of children and street children living there and asking for money on red lights or selling something. A lot of children exploitation exists, and all of them we observe. And also those who live in the periphery, when they work to go to the city as for work, they observe and they know that they exist. And this in their minds, this in the specter of vulnerability, this specter exists. That I don't want to be like that. They are afraid to be like them, and maybe they don't have enough possibilities to help them, but they have fear to be like them. Also, immigrants in the cities since the last when the strict regulations and the strict border securitization on the border in the U.S. with Mexico since maybe 10 years ago. Is increasing the quantity of immigrants in Mexico, trying to solve some documents on immigration offices in Mexico City, and trying to save some money, trying to later go to the border cities. But in the border cities, it's more dangerous because all the mafias control the border cities. They prefer to stay in Mexico City, that is safer, relatively safer than in the border cities, and they can earn some money in the city. And we can observe larger quantity of people, including Haitian or Africans that for Mexican eyes were not common, the black people. Now we observe in all the city, also in the periphery, Haitians or Cubans or Ecuador or someone even from Africa is increasing the quantity. Around 250,000 people, the immigrants are now in the city, and it's expected that it's going to grow more. And they live also in a spectrum of vulnerability. We observe them, and they live in the streets, and some of them cannot easily get a job, and they suffer constant abuses of the police or even local people. Also, prostitutes, homeless, all those people that we call very bottom, feeds the imagination of those who live in the periphery. I don't want to be like that. I don't want to have friends like that. I don't want to be involved with them. I don't want to be involved with anyone who looks like that, because maybe the mafias are involved, and the problem of the drugs and the cartels, and then the social ties are broken, and the link between the peripheral people and the most vulnerable is just the imagination. I don't want to be like them. I know they exist. I cannot help them. Even I want to help, I don't have enough things to help. I just simply don't want to have relations with them. The other point I was telling you is the accumulated abuse. People in the periphery also, they don't want to be involved with rich people or middle class, because these people constantly, they don't behave well. And they overexploited domestic workers. They don't pay what they need to pay. They force them to live. You work in the construction business. You sometimes you live in the same construction without toilet, without water. The working conditions are horrible, and people have these tensions with people who has money or people who own companies. There is not good relationship between peripheral people because they accumulated abuses with people who has companies on business. And now we observe a social tension, a divided class between those above and those at the bottom in Mexican society. It has been, it has existed for long, maybe centuries, but recently it's opened that division verbally and physically on social media, normal media, on the street. There is a division, of class division, and not only economically, but now social and psychological division. They really don't want to have nothing to do with those people who have money, nothing to talk, nothing to be involved, because they feel that they don't belong to each other. Another point is the media spread of fear. Also in these neighborhoods in Chalco and the periphery, is also there are every month you have a big news there. One of the big news that also people were talking a lot is one elder woman that killed mafia people or group of people who used to assault and occupy houses. They sometimes they say that they want to rent the house, but sometimes not. They just simply occupy houses that are not so full, or only one person is living, and they take them out. Or if no one is in the house, they get inside. And this elder woman, because they couldn't kick out those persons who occupied her house, came with a gun and killed the two persons inside. And this news was also spread everyone, and all the neighborhood is a topic of conversation. Every week, every month, we have this kind of big news in these neighborhoods, and people constantly, it's not gossip, simply exists. The idea that be careful even with your own neighbors, be careful with some stranger. This is in the spectrum of vulnerability, there's a lot of fear. And this fear also is transmitted constantly because by media. Some of the events are real, some of the events are exaggerated, and some of the events are like a red note and yellow notes. But this is constantly in social media, local media, TV, radio, and that also fits the spectrum of vulnerability. And the other one is very real. All this region, this part of the city, I have only 5 minutes, I almost finished, suffer a lot of alerts because the level of feminicides, young girls are the more vulnerable. If they are teenagers, are those who are easily to be kidnapped and not easily to be found. Sometimes if they found, already is killed. And this is another point that is feeding the fear, not only on media, really on the core of the families. Be careful. It's very difficult to find a girl alone. You need to go with her because it's dangerous that something can happen. And you cannot really be happy living under this situation, particularly for teenagers girls. And I have also in the interviews a lot of conversations about that. Then to end, I have these questions that I am trying to resolve myself and resolve with my students and my colleagues. In Mexico, to one extent, this spectrum of vulnerability, all these points, the media, the growth structural conditions, the accumulated abuses, and the observation of the most vulnerable people, the lumpen, how these conditions the politics, urban politics dynamics. What is going to happen with the politics? Are they just going to vote because someone give you a transfer of money? Because the government is now giving you transfer of money, 6,000 pesos, 7,000 pesos, that's enough to say, okay, my political participation will be like that. Just I will vote for Morena because he's giving me this quantity of money, or for another political party also give me money, I just my political participation is going to be like that. It's going to resolve the problem of vulnerability that I am explaining. The other one is to what extent this spectrum of vulnerability conditions the economics. What is going to happen? What is the link? Is it possible that this informality, this type of jobs will improve? Is this a possibility in the city to create jobs with high value, with a with better working conditions, with better attributes of the skills of the worker, with realizations of the creativity, of the innovation, seems to be now difficult. On the contrary, it seems to be like the link between informality and criminality can be stronger than informality and the formality, of the business. And also, what about the religious and the culture? This spectral vulnerability, how is changing? Because as I was telling you, new religions are emerging, not only the Catholic traditional, now the Santa Muerte, another one, the Santeros, and other ones that even I don't know the names, are growing as a way of protection. Many of these people who uses these rituals is to protect each other and not to be killed, and also to earn more money, or not to be killed, or not to be disappeared. No? That's also changing the dynamics of the culture, and the religiosity is also changing. Then politics, economics, and culture is changing the dynamics, and that's what I am trying to develop in my studies. And also the comparison to other cities, I usually do contrast with Manila, Metro Manila, cities in the Southeast Asia, Bangkok, when I have more affiliation and relations with other researchers. How the situation of these urban motor workers, is it different to Mexico City? Is it similar? In Latin America, in Brazil, in Argentina, in Colombia, in Venezuela, or in Southeast Asia, in Africa, I would like to know more the comparison with other global cities about this spectrum of vulnerability. What is happening there? What is the differences or similarities? That's mostly my work. The conclusion is that the spectrum of vulnerability exists, not only the social vulnerability. Now we have kind of imaginary vulnerability, this fear to be a victim, to be lumpen, to be criminalized. And finally, the changes that this fear and this spectrum of vulnerability is motivating to the economics, politics, and society. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Heriberto, for such an insightful presentation. It was really interesting to see how the concept of spectral vulnerability connects with the current events and everyday realities in Mexico City. We truly appreciate the way you illustrated your talk with recent and concrete examples. It really helped us to understand the social dynamics you described. Now, I would like to go with the questions. We have one from YouTube, from our public. It says, what challenges did you face during the fieldwork in places like Chimalhuacán or Valle de Chalco?
Yeah, the big challenge is the security. But I was born there. Most of my family lives there. 80% of my relatives lives there, and then my protection is in some way guaranteed because my family and my friends. I was born in Nezahualcóyotl, that is also in the periphery, and most of my social network is there. But and I have a partnership, anthropologists and social workers that are also from there. I usually hire in my projects people from UNAM. They are from UNAM or from UAM. That they are from in the neighborhood. I don't bring someone external to the neighborhood because it's dangerous. But if it's someone from the neighborhood, it's okay. I usually work with people in the neighborhood. Also, I use my personal social networks. And when I go to Manila, or also some problematics also in Jakarta, I also use my social network. Friends, ties with NGOs, on religious organizations who have helped me to do my research in terms of safety or security of myself. Basically, that's the main challenge.
Oh, okay, that sounds more safe.
Yes, say because also the mafia, the gangs, also this. If you are a stranger, they will say, "Why do you are doing questions? Why are you asking this?" They might think that you are a police, hidden police.
Yes, they don't care if you are for the research.
Yeah, but I don't take photographs. For example, I just take photographs in even I am from the neighborhood. I know I am with people in the neighborhood. I avoid to take photographs.
Okay.
Because if they observe you, they are taking photographs. I have take some photographs, but when I know that really here is not a problem. But in many other places that I would like to take photographs, I don't take photographs just to avoid the problem.
Okay, Well, I would like to ask, how did the households you interview respond to your research? Were they open to sharing their experiences?
Yes, yes, usually. Yeah, because I am not studying human traffic or drugs. What I study mostly is about food, and with food is social conditions. Where do they work? And I don't ask, for example, about illegal money. No, I just try to understand the. I can notice easily. They are open to say, no, yeah, I'm working in the Tianguis, I'm working here, I'm doing this. They are not afraid to talk about their jobs. On the contrary, they like to talk about their jobs and the situation in of vulnerability in the transportation, in the neighborhood fights, because in some way they feel familiarity with me because they know that I am from the same neighborhoods. That helps, and they are open. In generally, people are it's open. The only thing when they close themselves is when the emotions emerge. For example, when they start to think about a tragedy, assassination or robbery or someone injured, or something that affects themselves, a fight or a divorce or something that is maybe still painful, a death, something. The one you can do is just turn off your recorder or just don't continue to talk about the interview. They start to cry, and later you just need to wait. And if they want to talk, they will talk about that problem, even if you didn't expect. And you just need to give time if when they come down again and they can talk. But basically, that's the key issue. I am not a psychologist, or I am not studying human traffic or human organs or drugs, this kind of thing. If you talk about these topics, it will be more difficult for them to talk. But if it's about society, social relations, jobs, and how do they, what kind of things they like, what kind of things they think is be careful, they can talk.
Okay, that's an interesting, and that is a tip to questions to interview people. We have another question. This is in Spanish.
Mm.
It's from YouTube. It says, como mencionas, perdón, existen apoyos gubernamentales para esta población que únicamente consiste en aportaciones monetarias. ¿Qué acciones por parte del gobierno o políticas podrían llevarse a cabo para reducir la percepción que se tiene de la vulnerabilidad espectral?
Yeah, I think it's, can I respond in English or in Spanish?
Eh, how you, maybe in Spanish for the
En
person?
español, sí, sí, ahí es donde está la mayor oportunidad que se puedan usar. Bueno, no sé si los mismos recursos u otros recursos. Hace falta crear infraestructura. Me parece que ahorita van a hacer un proyecto con el Estado de México, la Ciudad de México, para mejorar las escuelas, mejorar las vías de transporte. Eh, eso va a ayudar un poco, pero si no llegan a ayudar a que existan empresas o acciones de empleo creativo, ¿no? O sea, empleo que logren ellos desarrollar sus habilidades y hacer productos que encuentren mercado. Es difícil porque van a seguir en la informalidad. La transferencia de dinero nada más va a seguir siendo nada más una ayuda para salir al día, pero no construye, o sea, no necesariamente ese dinero se va a invertir en una habilidad más o en incorporar una herramienta, una tecnología, un conocimiento. Hace falta mucho eso, ligar esos apoyos con habilidades, con conocimiento para que las personas tengan la posibilidad de crecer productivamente, esfuerzos productivos y que encuentren mercado. Ahí tienen el recuperar los tianguis o los mercados, que en los tianguis y mercados o en las tienditas se venden muchos productos que no son hechos por ellos, vienen muchos de ellos hasta importados. Entonces no hay un vínculo entre el mercado que sí hay mucho consumo y la producción. O sea, ellos no producen prácticamente nada, más bien son consumidores. No, y lo que producen son, pues, sí cocinan, ¿no? La comida corrida, hacen tacos, tortas, comida callejera, pero nada más hasta ahí llega, ¿no? No hay expectativa de que se puedan de ahí crecer más productiva y creativamente, ¿no? Ese es el abandono de la ciudad en términos creativos, tecnológicos, de conocimiento, de hacer una empresa, de hacer una cooperativa, o sea, algo más productivo, ¿no? Una asociación, eso es lo que hace falta.
Sí, es verdad. Tienes mucha razón. You're right. I have another two questions. I go with this. This is a comparative and global view. Do you see similar patterns of spectral vulnerability in other global cities such as London or Sao Paulo or Mumbai?
I don't know. I don't know. It's something that someone who lives there should. But perhaps it is the immigration. Well, cities when there is immigrants might be that idea of the lumpen, no prostitutes, drug addicts, might be. The only thing I am not don't know well as because I have been only studying in Manila, Southeast Asia, and Mexico, is the level of what is the relationship with the accumulated abuses, the energy of the abuses of these persons when they were workers um, yeah, when they were working or where they were living, how that energy of abuses is moving is the only thing I don't know. The other ones about blaming immigrants, prostitutes, drug addicts, maybe will be the same. And the media fear, I don't know how is the media in those cities. If it's similar in Mexico, it's really a lot of red note, constantly red, yellow. In Manila and Bangkok and Jakarta, it's less, much more less in terms of media spreading than Mexico. In terms of violence in Manila or Bangkok or Hanoi, the news are about accidents and problems. Yes, a lot of problems, but not in the level of violence that we have in Mexico. Here, I never see something like that like in Mexico.
Okay, thank you. Well, another question. How do you think this concept could influence urban planning or social programs in Mexico?
Yeah, I hope so, because even social vulnerability help to reduce the material conditions. But what I am trying to add are more socio-psychological, because the specter is not material, but it's something that is in your mind, your fear, or you don't want to be lumpen, you don't want to be poor. And yeah, it should be included in the urban management of the city. And giving priority uh, to the places when people are living, not only the streets but parks, sports facilities, main roads, schools, hospitals. When people can recover social activity outside the house, it's urgent to recover the social ties in the basketball court, in the football court, in the baseball court. If they need to build new sports facilities, organizing competition, hiring sports training teachers, dojo if they martial arts, boxing, gyms. This kind of activity need to help, need to recover the social ties to reduce the fear and the imagination that someone else is my enemy, or I am afraid of my neighbor. I need to know again my neighbor. And sports can help. Also, social parties, not only like festivals or religious festivals, but something more organized by the people. They need to recover to know each other again. They need to know who each other and not to be afraid of your own neighbor. And also talk with Haitians. I have been talking with Haitians to open a restaurant, Haitian food, that people can be not afraid of you because you are black or because you are Haitian or you speak like French Creole or Spanish very strange, that they can know you. And this interaction between immigrants, foreign immigrants, Central America, South America, and Africans in the city, with these people, that they are not afraid. Why are here? They are also connected with mafia? That people need to cut that fear. And social planning and urban policies need to help to recover the interaction between them in parks, sports, parks, whatever you can imagine, that they need to know each other.
That's true. It's interesting what you mentioned. Finally, what message would you like the audience to take away from this research?
Yeah, I would like to, if you are from a big city, if you can also study social vulnerability or this idea of spectral vulnerability, fears and abuses, accumulated abuses, and the idea of the relationship with the lumpen, the very bottom, in your city. I don't know how big is your city, where do you live, but there is a lot of things to do in this direction. If you can help me, you can connect with me and we can exchange. There are many things to discover. These relationships between the very bottom and those who are above, the immigrants, the indigenous people, media analysis of media, analysis of the economic conditions, the political intervention, how they are going to participate in politics. All this is what I want to tell you in the end that you can study. If you are studying political science, economic science, administrative science, or psychological science, you have many branches to branches to go, where to go, ways to go, and connected with this group of people, very bottom and those who are a little bit above them.
Thank you so much for that. And well, we have no more questions. Well, it's time to finish this session. Thank you so much for this interesting uh, uh, talk and for sharing your research and reflections with us today. And thanks everyone who joined the session of Science in Dialogue from the UNAM UK. Would you like to say something else or?
Yeah, you can find me. I now live in Querétaro. I live in Querétaro. I constantly go to Japan twice a year. But if you are coming to ENES Juriquilla one day, you can meet me, or you can find me in the on the websites of the UNAM. I will be happy. You can find me, just search my name, and you can find Heriberto Ruiz Tafoya. Some of the things I have been writing about, mostly about food in Manila, now I think of food in Mexico, but I am going to release these papers quite soon. This what I presented today will be part of a book in Brill, published in England, by the way, but it's a global cities, studies on Manila, Nairobi, my case of Mexico City, Paris, Tokyo, and New York. The conditions of urban bottom of a poor. Yeah, but basically you can write my name, and if you are interested, you can contact me. And if you are interested in this topics, also anthropology, culture, all these social science are very welcome.
Thank you so much. Well, we invite you, everyone, to follow us at the UNAM UK Center for Mexican Studies on social media to stay updated about our upcoming seminars and academic activities. And you can write us by email also to ask for the email for the Dr. Heriberto. Well, that's all for today. Have a wonderful day and see you in the next session. Thank you so much, Dr. Heriberto. And give me a moment to finish the session in YouTube. Oh, I'm sorry, I lost my... and finish, thank you. Listo, perdón.
Sí,
Había perdido mi
gracias. Si
ventana.
acabamos el tiempo, sí estuvo más o menos
Sí,
del tiempo.
sí, sí, sí.